lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to Now Slaying, an It Slays podcast production where we break down the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I'm your not-so-humble host, Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And today on the show, we're going to be reviewing You'll Never Find Me, which was released March 22nd, 2024, streaming on Shudder. Rowan, it's been a while since we've covered a Shudder original. Are you keeping up with their original programming still? Were you looking forward to this one?
Yeah, I'm trying to. This one, I missed this one until you brought it up to me, and I was just curious about, I'm like, is this the year of Shudder? It seems like this year Shudder's just has a lot of high profile stuff or like highly regarded stuff coming out of film festivals.
Yeah, like I think next month is like Late Night with the Devil, which obviously it has an AI issue right now that people are discussing, but I mean Shudder I think got the exclusive streaming rights to that in like a month, and I can't wait to see it. So they had a lot of good stuff coming.
Yeah, like, so I mean, I'm always excited to see what Shudder has. I try to keep up, like, especially once the stuff comes out on physical media. Like, I try to buy all the Shudder stuff because in Canada at least, we only get DVDs, so it's only like $12 brand new.
Oh, geez.
So
okay.
It's like super cheap. So I like to support Shudder. But yeah, what about you? Keeping up?
Yeah, as you know, like, I'm not a huge Shudder guy. You're usually the one who's messaging me about like this Shudder release, and then I always kind of look through Letterboxd or kind of see if it made the festival rounds. And the issue is just in the past we've reviewed a couple of stinkers, like when the show was getting going, and we were trying to, always have something to cover in the off weeks. And it was just kind of the sort of thing where I was like, let's just cover the Shudder releases when they're worth talking about, or when they at least have, some buzz around them or whatnot. With this one in particular, I think it was like a 5-star review from The Guardian that caught my attention. I think it was just like my Google Trends or something like that. They brought it up to me and I saw it and I was like, okay, like I haven't heard about this. Australian horror. Obviously, I loved last year's Talk to Me and another Australian horror. So this was kind of like, as soon as I saw that this was Australian horror and had good reviews, I was interested in it. It also premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival, which once again, like a big film festival showing, it's just all kind of like little check marks, little things I look for to basically see like, okay, is this, something that we should cover on the show? I'm not saying like these smaller movies that get no press, you shouldn't, watch yourself. It's just, I'm not sure if it's worth talking about a smaller movie that we don't like and it's the filmmaker's first movie. It's just kind of like, I don't know how that's really doing anyone's favors, other than making sure that we have something to fill our gap week.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was something I was looking forward to purely based on what I was seeing, the conversation online about it. So did we find a hidden gem here? Well, before we get into that, let's kick it on over to the trailer.
I'm sorry. The weather has gone crazy out there. Is it okay if I use your phone?
I have to admit, this thunderstorm is strange. What made you come here?
I don't know, I just ran. I'd really need a lift into town.
I'll take you there when the weather lets up.
Do you get lonely all the way out here? Hiding?
Hiding?
Or I'll just start running something.
You've never been here before? You have a familiar face.
That should probably get out of your way.
I don't think he can. I'm just messing with you. Did you tell someone you were coming here? What are you actually doing here tonight? You invite yourself into my life and then act like I dragged you here.
Sometimes it's like we're drawn to unhappy endings.
Like a population of fucking moths. What are you hiding from?
What you just heard is from You'll Never Find Me, directed by Indiana Bell and Josiah Allen, and written by Indiana Bell. And the story is as follows. On a dark and stormy night, Patrick, a lonely resident of an isolated trailer park, finds a young woman at his door seeking shelter from the elements. As the night wears on and the weather deteriorates, the two find themselves consumed by a shared anxiety and mutual mistrust of one another. Now, here on Now Slang, we like to keep things relatively spoiler-free up front before getting into the more in-depth spoiler-filled discussion. So, Rowan, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on You'll Never Find Me?
You know, I thought this was pretty good. I won't say I enjoyed myself in this one. A little, you know, there's some bodies, but there's really just two people, so it's a small cast, single location film. This is like the recipe for real hit or miss 100%. Territory.
Yeah.
This can go really well or really bad. You know, I think the main thing I would imagine, I haven't read anything about this, no reviews, no anything, but, you know, I would imagine most of the talk about this, or at least for me, would have to be like sound design. I don't know how you watch this. I watch this with headphones on, and I was really immersed in this. I really enjoyed that, you know, the like whisperings and sound effects that were also kind of like leading you through this twist and turn story of this man and this woman. And also like, you know, slow burns close to my heart. I think you also are a big slow burn guy usually.
Yeah, I think with a slow burn, I need to look for a few different things. And most of the time it's like, okay, is there going to be a payoff to this, or is it just going to end suddenly? And then also there needs to be like a vibe I like about it or something I admire about it. So you've mentioned like, obviously this is a single location movie and you said it's like a big risk. And I completely agree. Single location movies, in my opinion, they live and die by two things. And it's essentially the strength of your actors and the strength of the script. So if you don't have one of those things, it's going to wind up being a pretty like boring slog. You really need both of those things to be singing, because you don't really have like that visual, you know, you're not changing things up enough to keep it interesting visually a lot of the time. You can have good cinematography and whatnot still. But it's very much like you need to buy into these actors, the situation they're in, and then what they're saying. And I think this movie, in my opinion, has both of those things in spades. I thought the performances by the two leads, which I don't know either of them, Brendan Rock and Jordan Cowan, I thought they were both great. I very much enjoyed their performances. It's not really so much a performance that's like verbal sparring with one another. A lot of the tension or a lot of kind of what they're saying is more metaphorical monologues or deliberations on life and death. Yeah, nihilism, you know, it's once again, it's kind of like this way that in real life, do we ever go on a 2 or 3 minute monologue if we're not on a podcast? And it's like, oftentimes, no, like that's not really how normal conversations work, right? As I love that I couldn't just say conversations correctly without slurring my words. But that's not how conversation usually works, right? Like we don't just, you know, ramble on. So when I see that in a movie like this, it's very much like, okay, like obviously people don't speak this way, but is what they're saying interesting? And I have multiple little notes throughout this movie of like things that were said or certain passages that I thought were interesting, that I did enjoy. And you know, once again, the actors delivering it, I thought was really good. There's lots of little moments throughout the movie that ratchets up the tension that we just cannot talk about at all, because basically anything outside of what the premise is for this movie winds up being a spoiler. So it's just like, we'll probably have a lot of things to touch on in the spoiler-filled discussion. But yeah, I thought basically, you know, the single location, the actors, the script was very good. I don't know what your question was or how I got involved and started rambling on, but
no, that's okay. You were heading where I was, because, you know, my main note about this was also like the lead's fantastic, especially Brendan Rock. Obviously, like I said, no idea who he is. I've never seen anything he's been in, but like to be able to hold up like the monologues he does have and like keep me, you know, hanging on to like every word. And that's why I felt like it was such a well done slow burn, was that I was like starved for information. And you have all these like sounds going on, and you don't know at all what's going on really, other than these people having this like late night interaction. So you're like really listening to what they say for any clue of what could possibly the story be like unraveling in front of me?
Yeah, this, even though you keep saying it's a slow burn, this was like an active watching experience for me, purely because I was so much in the world where I was listening to what they were saying and trying to find kind of like, oh, but you just said this, like, how does that impact what you said before? And then it's like, oh, the character calls them out on it right away. And I'm like, lots of times in movies, the characters don't do that. They allowed like an inconsistency just to happen, and then it winds up being like resolved in the third act or something. But that's not really how, once again, natural conversations happen. Like if someone's telling you a story and you notice something that's kind of strange or doesn't line up, you know, a lot of people will kind of like interrogate it a little bit. And that happens in this movie, you know, multiple times, where it's like it kind of keeps swaying you back and forth on like who has the power here, what's exactly happening. Like obviously a woman showing up at a dude's door at like 2 a.m. in the middle of like a storm is already like, this is kind of strange. How does this happen? And you know, you a little bit of hand waving in order for this to happen and for the movie to happen. I don't know if this would exactly play out the way it does in real life, the way it does in this movie, but it's the sort of thing where it's like I was hanging on every word trying to figure out what was happening here and where we were going and who was lying and who was telling truths and half-truths and all this stuff. That I was very much engaged. And all of that, in my opinion, comes down to the screenwriting. Like the writing itself is, I think, is very strong in this movie. Does it all wrap up perfectly the way I would like? Probably not. But I do still think like a lot of it is particularly great. I do wish like the third act kind of was a little bit more subtle, or maybe wrapped up a little bit a little bit more quickly, because I do think it kind of drags on a tad. It's not boring because what's happening is, you know, entertaining and engaging. It's just like I got kind of what you were saying with this ending like 5 minutes ago, essentially, is kind of like my issues with that a little bit. You mentioned the sound a couple of times, and you said you never read any reviews or anything. I didn't read the Guardian's review. Once again, I just saw the star rating and the headline. But a lot of the Letterboxd reviews are praising the sound design. A lot of people absolutely love it. I'm one of the few people that I didn't like it.
Oh, no.
Specifically for me, I noted that I thought the first 10 minutes or so of this movie, there was just an overuse of the score, and it was just very loud. And I understand, like, there's a storm going on outside, but it was just like, I thought the Foley wasn't good enough to sell the storm going on. Like, it was a lot of rattling. It felt like a lot of stock sound effects to me. And then also the lighting in the beginning, where like kind of, I felt like I could almost point to the screen and tell you when the lightning was going to hit, because there was almost like a rhythm to how like the lightning was hitting and then the thunder coming in with the bass and whatnot, that I understand like how you can completely get like overwhelmed by it and enjoy it and whatnot. For me, it was just like, I just thought it felt very fake, I guess. It felt very like low budget, I thought, to me, like the sound design and the lighting. What I will say is that the further on you get in the movie, the storm is just an ever-present thing in the movie, but they don't like surface it as much. After like 10 or 15 minutes, it does start to like take a little bit more of like a back seat, and the lighting and stuff kind of relaxes a little bit, and I can just focus on the characters and whatnot, and I, just settle into the movie, and I enjoy it more when that happens. But I mean, you're not alone. Most people absolutely love the sound design in this, and I watched it on just the TV setting, sound bar in the middle. So I mean, it's not the best way to experience a movie, but that's the only way I can, pretty much. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know if it helped me anymore. Like, I had headphones on,
exactly,
and I was so I was cut off from anything in the outside world other than this. And maybe I'll save it for the spoiler section. I have some thoughts on the lightning and the rhythmicness of it, because I did notice, like, you could pretty much time it out. But like I said, I mean, this is yet again one of those hard movies to discuss in a spoiler-free way, because, like we said, where there's so much but so little also going on, that like
and you don't want to really tip your hat one way or the other and tell people what's happening, right? So we just got to be constantly dancing around how we frame certain phrases and whatnot. So the last thing I'll say really quick before we just get into whether or not we recommend it is just, we talked about the performances. I just want to give a shout out to the casting director, because I think both of these people, who knows, maybe they are actors in Australia. I haven't searched it up. I don't know if they have like a bunch of different credits to their names, but both of them felt very much like just people to me. Like, they didn't look too actorly. Like, obviously Brendan Rock, he's an older man with a big beard and stuff. Like, they're actors. They're not like these disgusting, everyday people. They're still an actor. But I didn't feel like, Jordan Cowan doesn't look like a supermodel. No. Like, Brendan Rock isn't this, hunk, right? Like, they felt more so like what their characters were supposed to be. Which, when I was watching it, that was another level to it that it didn't take me out. Like, I'm glad this wasn't like these actors I know and they didn't look typical Hollywood for the movie that they're telling. So it's just, casting lots of times doesn't get a shout out. So I just want to shout them out. I thought it was a great job done there.
So you're saying you wouldn't rather this movie star like The Rock and I don't know.
Kid. I don't even know who would be like the Hollywood it girl. The Rock and Anya Taylor-Joy. You'll never find me. I mean, I love Anya Taylor-Joy, but I mean, it's just like, yeah, I'm glad that this felt like a story that it almost felt like we could have just been watching like a reenactment of a documentary or something. Yeah. Like it wasn't like, it didn't feel super showy to me. Obviously, in the spoiler section, we'll talk about like some of the more cinematic aspects or like how it is a bit showy. It's just in the terms of the casting, it didn't feel that to me. It felt like we were experiencing what could be a real story essentially. But yeah, so everything I'm going towards, like, once again, the only thing I didn't like is the sound design in the first bit of the movie, and it is a smaller scale movie, so just go in knowing that it's going to be a slow burn. I think it does pay off. Even if it's a little bit, a little bit long in the tooth, I think, for specifically showing the payoff in the third act. But I mean, I would definitely recommend this. What about yourself?
Yeah, 100% I would recommend this. I think this is probably like one of the better Shudder things I've seen. So, I mean, I think it's worth your time to check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it didn't even feel like straight to streaming in a lot of ways. Like, it didn't have that Netflix look to it. I mean, they probably don't have Netflix money to accomplish even what that looks like. But yeah, it's just like the set, all that stuff. It looked great. The only thing to me that was a little bit off for me is the sound design. But like I said, I'm in the minority there. So looks like both of us are recommending this one. And with that, I think it's time we cut to the spoiler discussion for You'll Never Find Me. We are now in our spoiler discussion for You'll Never Find Me. So if you've not seen You'll Never Find Me, what are you doing? You can just stream it on Shudder. But if not, it's time to tune out and come back once you've seen the movie, or keep listening if you simply don't care. Rowan, basically, we're tiptoeing around everything. I don't know if there's something you want to get off your chest right away with the movie, or where you want to start.
I think we brought it up in the spoiler-free section too, but it's just, I can't say, I can say it over and over again how much I love the dialogue in this movie of the almost like playfulness of Patrick and this visitor. And just, when you think you have it figured out, they throw some sort of curveball where I'm like, all right, Patrick is the bad guy. And then you're like, oh, wait a second. No, he's being very truthful. And I think they were very smart to make both of these characters kind of both unreliable narrators.
Yeah.
So it really gives you that confusion of what's going on, which I think pays off later on, where we kind of realize that this is all, like a dream. This is all like a hallucinatory dream state. I kind of, I'm kind of thinking that, maybe this is his own hell, like his own personal hell. I was kind of getting some, the house that Jack built, some vibes when he's in hell and he's kind of reliving these things that he's done.
Yeah.
But yeah, just so good. I love this is how a puzzle mystery should be unraveled in movies.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen a lot more chamber pieces or two-handers that essentially they don't take the time to play with your emotions as much as this movie does, where I have my third note is, I guess this guy killed one of these feral children, and now this is the spirit returned during the storm to, make him pay for it. Which, I'm wrong about one detail there. It's not the feral children, it's a tourist. But realistically, I guessed the movie, one of my first notes, and for the entire movie, it had me questioning on whether or not I was right. And that's the thing where it's both of them are lying about certain things, or lying by omission and omitting certain details. That it was enough that it was keeping me intrigued, but also just very much oh, okay, I can understand how this woman at the door could be crazy and maybe she's here to, kill this guy. obviously you can understand how a creepy dude living in a trailer park and, might have a thing for killing, women if they're all alone and appear at his trailer or whatever, right? Like you can figure that out. So there is like this constant, almost like this danger either way, back and forth. And both characters are kind of like discovering things throughout the movie, like whether or not it's like an earring here or whether or not it's a gap in this woman's story that he's kind of picking up on, or, oh, is there something in the drink? Is there something not in the drink? And it's just all these almost like little masterful suspense, masterful items to build suspense. I don't know how to specifically say it, but it's like they ratchet it up enough and then deflate it at the right times that I was always interested and I was never exhausted, which is the other thing. It's like a lot of these sorts of movies, they would just keep the tension going completely for 80 minutes and you just be completely like kind of over that feeling, kind of just tired by the end. There's enough moments in this movie where it's like the shower scene, for example, he's insistent on her getting a shower to, warm herself up, wash herself off. I'm like, no woman that I know just showing up to this guy's, trailer park would ever allow this to happen. But if you were pressured into doing it, like just kind of showcasing the horror of that scene, and then there's no lock on the bathroom door, and then him kind of creeping outside, walking up the hallway, and it's just like, this is very like unnerving scene, but then it's completely deflated by it's like, oh, he just hung he said, oh, I'm coming in, and he hung a towel there for her to dry off, and it's like, oh, he's not like a rapist or whatnot. So it's like, okay, all right, it deflates it, and we go back, and it's like, okay, now we understand these characters a little bit more, or we believe we do.
Yeah.
And there's another scene further in it with the bullshit where they're playing like the card game, which is just obviously this sort of culminates in like different stories that they're telling one another where they're calling each other out on their bullshit, but also during the card game bullshit. And once again, it's one of these aspects of the screenplay that it's just like wonderfully done. It's kind of obvious to make them play this game called bullshit where they got to tell if the other one's lying. But I just like how the different stories overlap and they're picking them apart, and it's just all kind of culminating in this card game. And it's just like there's numerous examples of this throughout the movie. We would just sit here and talk about every other scene essentially if we were doing this. But yeah, you mentioned the dialogue. I got multiple like just little quotes from this movie, like, like a population of fucking moths comes up multiple times in the movie, right? Like where essentially, why are these people just drawn to kind of like their own self-destruction? And he says that early in the movie, and he has this very nihilistic point of view. But then she talks about herself and about how people like her, those free spirits, are drawn to unhappy endings, like a population of fucking moths. And it just keeps coming up. And like, I like these thematic statements that are kind of like, threaded throughout the movie, and they kind of come up, and it doesn't feel like over the top or feel like too flowery. I agree that they're speaking very metaphorically, but like, I love when they say that, the only thing different out here, is a different tasting tap water and a new scenery for our misery, for example. Like, I like that there's this idea of like, he's out here in a certain way to like torture himself,
Yeah.
Almost. Like I there's all these ideas, and whether or not they're being honest, which is the whole point of the movie, that they're not really either one of them. It's just, I like these concepts brought up and then also like interrogated and kind of ripped apart a bit. And it was just like, once again, I just thought it was always interesting, all the dialogue throughout it.
Yeah, well, and like I said, like I was trying to think of a better word, but I mean, really, like I said, I think it's very like poetic. It kind of has this like morose feel to it. Like it kind of really gave me like some like Edgar Allan Poe vibes, like almost like this, even though like there's really nothing gothic about this. Just
no,
like
there's not, but there's this feeling. I get what you're saying.
The feeling and the language of it is just like maybe how self-reflective it is, especially with Patrick, and kind of, dealing with, not, by the end of it, not obviously like being the bad guy kind of, but we've learned so much about him that it was almost like you're sympathizing with him, that he's like almost throughout this story, now that you have all the pieces, like justifying like why he is like he is. And, it's just kind of like they're talking about, like just the town of moths. Like, it's just like, I'm attracted to doing this.
Yeah, to be clear, he is sympathetic, but he is still like a bad dude.
He's 100% bad dude.
He explains his rationale, but I mean, the guy is still like a serial killer, rapist guy, right? By the end of it. But it's just, we've seen him through a different lens for so much of the movie that it's still like, obviously we're rooting for the guy to get what's coming to him at the end of the movie, but it's like, okay, like I understand his rationale or what he believes to explain why he does this.
Yeah. Well, and to me, I think I'm talking more so like, the first and second part of this film, because that's what makes the third, the twist really great, is that all these things that were like, oh, fuck yeah, he's gonna at least stare at her in the shower or like something. It's like everything they build up. It's like, no, actually, he's a good guy. Like you need to rethink who's the bad guy here.
Yeah, the door wasn't locked when we thought it would be locked. He knows that she dumped the tomato soup in the boot, but he doesn't say anything about it for a while. Or like, there's all these little aspects where it's like, okay, he is sympathetic. He isn't a creepy guy who wants to murder this woman, which is obviously the implication for so much of this. It's like you're very much in her point of view, where it's like, I completely understand why she's incredibly apprehensive, and I completely understand why Patrick is creepy no matter what he says. Even if for a lot of the movie his actions don't explicitly come off as creepy, there's just a societal setup and understanding that like this is a sketchy situation, right? Like it's why in Barbarian, when we watch it and two people of relatively the same age and same social status and everything, they come together and they're staying in this Airbnb, but it's still like, all right, he's gonna kill her though, right? Like we're all watching Barbarian and we're waiting for this dude to just be a creep, and everything in that movie is like, no, he's actually fine, right? So like when I was watching this, there's just like there's this tension that's just building throughout, and you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. And like I said, so much of it is framed from her point of view, that there's stuff like she's in the shower and washing herself, and then blood starts running down. You're like, oh, okay, does she have a head wound or something? It's like, nope, there's no head wound, but blood's coming out. Or like when she discovers the different earrings, and it's like, okay, well, the earring is now missing from her ear, but I didn't see it missing. Like, was it just never there? Like, is she a little bit off? Like there's all these aspects of unreliable narration in like what they're seeing, but also in what they're saying, that it completely keeps me at just like engrossed of like trying to unravel and untangle this mystery.
So I mean, do we want to
let's talk about, I guess, the actual mystery or what actually happens at the end of it, because once again we're in the spoiler filled discussion, but we're still just tiptoeing around it. But yeah, essentially the movie starts off with basically Patrick kind of sitting by himself nursing a drink, kind of cuts to the credits and comes back, and we see a very quick like snippet of like a woman outside in the rain, and we hear like the rain and the storm and everything, and then we're just basically in Patrick's RV for the rest of the movie. But essentially what that that interstitial at the beginning of the movie was just like, it was showing this tourist approaching Patrick's car, and he let this woman in and then eventually killed her. And basically what we've been following this entire movie is Patrick is just like a serial killer slash serial sex offender, for sure as well. And essentially what he is reliving here is kind of like his penance, or what has been coming to him for like all of his sins. It's like this woman that he's killed so many of them, he can no longer remember their faces. He can only remember certain details. They've all just kind of blurred together. Confronts him essentially on this storm, and whether or not it's all in his head or another reality or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But what we're watching is basically her kind of grappling with it or trying to figure it out, and then also in the end inevitably like winding up dead, only to revive and kind of flip everything on Patrick and get his comeuppance right in the end, essentially.
Yeah, and so like to me, you were saying the third act didn't necessarily work for you. I think when the madness unfolds,
it just goes on a little bit too long for me. Like I like obviously the revelation of like him checking her ribs and seeing the heartbeat tattoo, which is set up earlier in the movie as the tourist. For me specifically, it's just like, I'm fine with her rising up. I like the shot of kind of her head coming up and the blood running down her cheek as the camera tracks and follows her. Like a lot of this stuff is really technically well done. It's just, I think it goes on a little bit too long. Like he runs into the bedroom, we get just a black screen as he's reliving a story he told about his father and a power outage. Then he comes out and it's just like all these different women with veils over their faces, kind of all like torturing him. And then, they set up the GHB that he like drinks a bunch of it and all this stuff. It's just like, It probably goes on for almost like, I'd say like 10 minutes of madness, I would say, probably at the end of this movie.
Yeah, I think maybe you're right if they had to, like, shut it down a little bit. I don't really know if I needed, like, all the women in the kind of, like, the main room. Because I kind of got the point when she comes
all of them
to.
chanting for him to drink and all of them chanting to, whatever the other chants are. A lot of that felt a little bit hokey to me and a little bit too showy. I just like the more insular and grounded story. Like, I would have been completely fine if she, like, rose up and stabbed him with a screwdriver or something that was set up earlier in the movie, or like stabbed him and then had her monologue to him as he was bleeding out on the ground or something like that. Like something just a little bit quicker. If we're going to introduce all the women, which once again, I don't hate, because we just got to know like how prolific this guy was. Did he just kill one person or two people or what it was? But I would have liked if all the girls had the main actress's face.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I would have liked that, because I think then she can very much stand in for any woman in this movie, because essentially he is basically saying, like, it doesn't matter who these women are or who these free spirits are, whoever they are. They're constantly putting themselves in harm's way, and he's going to take advantage of it every time. And he doesn't look at them as like people anymore. He just looks at like kind of a need to an end that he needs to satisfy. And he's just a weird guy, so obviously remembers certain details. He doesn't care about the face or the person underneath. And I think it would have been a strong, I guess maybe it's also obvious, but I just thought for sure they were all going to have her face, because she's never given a name. She's just woman in the movie. And I just would have liked that little detail if we were going there. And then, of course, you'd only ever need to do it for like one comp shot as like he's, dragged to his bathroom or when he's coming out or whatever. And then after that, you just put the veils or, the head wraps on them for however they were, covered up and disposed of. There was one detail, is like, if we were going there, I wish they did that. Just because, once again, the facial blindness or not being able to recognize people is like a big beat of this movie. Like, if he was someone who cared about who he killed and really like lamented over it, he would obviously remember this woman. The other detail with that story as well is I wish she had an accent that was obvious of a tourist, because she's just sounding to me like Australian or Kiwi or whatever the entire movie. And it was just the sort of thing that I was like, if she's a tourist, she should have been an American or had an American accent or, a European accent or something that was different. Something to maybe even just signal to us a little bit that she's not who she is. Because once again, a lot of her stories don't make sense. She's come from the bar, she's come from the beach, she's come from wherever, her car's broken down, whatever explanation she gives. That it was just, I would have liked if she had like an accent to denote that a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I think that would have been like a good thing. Although I kind of thought about it too, of the fact that, he keeps bringing up like his wife and stuff, who we later find out it obviously isn't his wife. It's just someone another girl he's murdered.
He took advantage of literally hours earlier. Yeah.
So then my thought process was like, I wonder if she was a tourist, or maybe he's just preying on like poor women in the area. Cause he does, he says multiple times, like, especially in the third act, like he talks about, like once everything's kind of revealed, like no one comes and finds these girls, like no one cares. So he keeps doing it. Like, he can't be stopped, and then obviously we get, like, the visions of the cops, like, at his front door and all that kind of stuff. And man, it's kind of what I was wondering or thought was, once, that third act kind of concludes and we get all the craziness done, and then basically him realizing he's drunk the whole bottle with the GHB, I kind of wondered, like, did any of the movie happen? Like, or was this maybe just like, he's literally dying, he's sitting there, he did kill himself, and then this was all just like that brain activity before, like
his hell, essentially.
His hell before he dies.
Yeah, I don't think the movie really leans one way or the other with that. Like, obviously you get the shot of her helping him drink / forcing him to drink, as it's all like dribbling out and, he's just choking it down. But then we get the hard cut back out to essentially the beginning of the movie, where it's just like, yeah, once again, we have no idea. We know, like, he's been dealing with these delinquent kids playing Nicky Nicky Knock Knock, in his area. But it's just like, we don't know if what just happened actually played out, if it was all in his head, how much of the story was real. And that's the thing. It's like, for me in particular, I don't really care too much about that answer. It's just I'm glad that guy basically got his comeuppance at the end. It's more of like just like a talking point, and I don't think it's like even like a messy one where it's like, oh well, if it's all in his head, then this didn't mean anything, or oh, if it's an alternate reality, I mean that undercuts this. It's just kind of like, yeah, when they cut back out, it's just kind of more like a button on it. It's just like a cute ending to let you know that like, yep, he's there rotting away in his trailer park, and who knows if anyone will ever find him. Like they never found the woman, right? Doesn't really matter. But yeah, with that, I mean, I feel like there's lots of little details we could touch on and talk over, but like by and large, I think we touched on most of the beats of the movie.
Yeah, I think the important ones.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, I'm sure after we finish recording this, I'll be like, damn it, I wish I mentioned this one moment, because there was a lot of moments I liked throughout it. Once again, it's just like, I think it's very good at continually building the tension, releasing it at the right points, and then always keeping me like on my toes, trying to figure out who's telling the truth. Who are we siding with, and how do we feel about these characters? And I just thought, once again, it was very well done, I thought. So yeah, anything else before we get into reviewing this, or?
No, I'm good to rate it.
Cool. So if you're new to the podcast, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. So Rowan, what would you give You'll Never Find Me?
2 now slayings in a row. I'm coming in hot. I'm giving it a slay.
No way.
I really liked it. Like,
oh my God,
I
dude.
already wrote it in my notes for like the minute Shudder announces this goes to physical media. Hopefully it does. I'm like, I need to buy this. I'm already like, I was like, Exilia, you got to watch this with me. Like, I think she'd be really into it. Like, I can't wait to tell people about this. And, I think maybe if this was like, maybe a different creators, different whatever, I mean, maybe I would have been more inclined for a yay, but like for like people that I've never heard of, or that seems like this is kind of, it seems like they've done like some indie stuff that I saw.
Yeah, they've done some shorts. I think this is their directorial debut. Yeah.
I really got the feeling kind of like when we saw Talk to Me. I'm just like, I can't believe this is your first thing you've done, because I just think it's technically really well done. Like script wise, like we said, like it's just, I was like gushing over how much I enjoyed everything being said. I enjoyed the mystery of it. Like, I had a time with this. I already want to rewatch it. So, yeah, I'm done gushing. I'll shoot it over to you.
Well, good. I'm glad I picked it then, and how how much you enjoyed it. But yeah, for me, I guess I'm a bummer again, similar to Immaculate, which I think you gave a slay. I'm gonna give this, it's a strong yay. I think I enjoyed this actually a little bit more than Immaculate. I have less issues with it. But the only thing really keeping it from that is just, I thought like a lot of the cinematography was good. It wasn't like amazing. It didn't like blow my socks off or anything. And I had some issues with the sound design, which you watching it with headphones, once again, had no issues, and most people haven't had any issues with that. So yeah, I just think this is like a very good to great movie. I think it's a testament what you can do with like a very small budget and just a couple of actors in a single location. I would assume that they probably just built an RV set and just filmed everything pretty much in the one spot, so you can, modify the lighting however you need to do it. So yeah, it was very much like this. When I watched this, it was similar to Talk to Me in a way of where it just made me want to write something that seems achievable. And this is like at a budget level where if you just write a really good script with 2 actors, obviously a different setup than this, like you can make a great movie with it, a great little indie movie. And this was definitely one of the Shudder originals that I've seen that I thought was like the most impressive in ages. So yeah, it's a yay from me. It's like probably like a 4-star on Letterboxd for me. I think it's it's a great movie, and I'm very interested to see what these filmmakers can do with like a little bit more of a budget, in multiple locations and whatnot, because the script is so tight, the acting is great. Give these people a budget. I'm sure, without studio interference, if they're just left to their own devices to make their own thing, they can make something even greater, I would think. So if you made it this far in the show and you're not following us on our socials, you can do so at It Slays Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Slasher, Letterboxd, Threads, Blue Sky. If there's a social media, we're probably there at It Slays Podcast. And if you want to help support the show financially, like our horror hounds Holly, Nicholas, Patrick, Mark, Stephen, Joy, Carvey, Dan, Brian, Trevor, and Genesis, gain access to the Patreon exclusive show Stream Screams and get episodes of the main show 48 hours early. Be sure to head on over to patreon.com/itslayspodcast and choose whatever tier works best for you. Rowan, I noted that I didn't like some of the score at the beginning of the movie. I didn't mind it,
but it's not like notable.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to say. I felt like it was over the top, a little bit emotionally manipulated right at the beginning of the movie, but I don't remember how it evolves throughout. So probably not anything from this making the playlist.
Yeah, probably not. But I mean, like I said, it was all right. But yeah, go to Spotify, go to the It Slays Podcast Horrific playlist. If you have any problems finding it, you can go to any of the social media that Colton just mentioned. Go to the bio, click on the Linktree link, take you directly there. We upload licensed music and scores from iconic horror movies we review, or just horror movies we love. So yeah, go follow the playlist and get your spooky music on, because why the hell not?
And next time on the show, it's time for Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. I have my ticket for later this week. You got your ticket yet?
I gotta get mine, so...
Okay, all right. Well, it's happening. I'm gonna go see it later this week, so sadly, we'll be suffering through Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. Hopefully it'll be better than I'm expecting, I guess. We'll see. And with that, I think that about wraps things up for this episode. So until next time, I'm Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And as long as you keep listening, we'll keep slaying.